They didn't just exile Earth, they erased us. One day, humanity had a seat at the galactic table. Well, a small seat, at the edge, like an annoying guest nobody wanted but couldn't ignore. We were new to the stars, brash and clumsy compared to the polished diplomacy of older races like the Sarathi or the Ilterans. But we were learning. We thought we had time. Then came the Solar Sanction. It was a closed vote. No warning, no appeal. Earth was declared a rogue developmental zone, a fancy phrase that meant we were banned from trade, technology sharing, or even diplomatic contact. The official reason was aggressive tendencies and cultural instability. Unofficially? The council was scared of what we might become. I was 27 when the sanction hit, a junior comms officer on the loyal Spark, one of Earth's diplomatic carriers orbiting Sata Prime. We were delivering peace packages, medicine, food, even art, to the less developed colonies in the outer cradle. We believed in connection, in peace. That same day, the Sarathi warships jumped in system. No warning. They opened fire on our ship first. My cabin shook like hell. I remember screaming, trying to send out a distress beacon, not even knowing we were being hunted now. In a matter of hours, 6 of our peaceful envoys were reduced to debris. Survivors were few. Most were taken. The rest, like me, just ran. They called it a containment operation. They called us dangerous, that we'd infected younger races with chaotic ideals. But let me tell you something about chaos. It's the most honest thing the universe has. 3 months later, I was on Europa, the icy moon we never gave much attention to before. Now it was the seat of something raw, something no one had expected. Unity. The Earth governments fell into line not because of fear, but because we were finally facing something bigger than our petty divisions. Left, right, rich, poor, it all broke down in the face of survival. The ban turned us into ghosts, but ghosts are hard to kill. Harder to predict. They thought they'd broken us. Instead, they woke up something they couldn't understand. A species with nothing to lose and an unbreakable grudge. We started small, smuggling old tech, reclaiming satellites, restoring broken hulls. The Council had tried to block our access to the stars, but they forgot. Earth never asked for permission in the first place. Within a year, we launched the Phoenix Fleet. 6 ships, cobbled together from wreckage and outdated war tech. But they flew, and they fought. That's when the whispers began across the galaxies. Stories of human ships showing up in dead zones and disputed borders. Stories of colonies liberated from council taxes and corruption. Rumors of a shadow empire rising in the dark, built not on peace treaties, but on loyalty, blood, and rage. We didn't fly the Earth flag anymore. We flew the banner of the Defiance, and I became its voice, not by choice, not by design, but because the galaxy needed to hear us, and I was the one who survived long enough to speak. The first time I spoke to the colonies, I said only one sentence. They exiled us to silence us. Now we speak with thunder. It wasn't a rebellion anymore. It was a reckoning. We didn't want war. We were forced into it. You know, it's strange how quickly you can turn from idealist to revolutionary. One day you're sending poems to alien diplomats and cultural exchange holograms, and the next, you're standing in a decommissioned mining station, handing out plasma rifles to kids who should have been in school. That was Europa, our first cradle of defiance. A moon of ice, always quiet, forgotten by most of Earth's power players. But under the frost, something ancient stirred. It wasn't a weapon or technology. It was human rage, compressed, focused, sharpened like a blade. That station, Station Vostok, became our first command node, our unofficial capital. And me? I became something I didn't recognize. My name, Yelena Koss, used to show up on interstellar broadcasts as a peace coordinator. I had degrees in linguistics, cultural anthropology, and diplomacy. Now they called me the voice of the void. I didn't earn the name in a speech. I earned it when I stood before the last survivors of our diplomatic corps, burned, scarred, grieving, and told them that the only way to survive was to make the galaxy remember our name with fear. Not respect, not admiration. Fear. The first campaign of the Defiance wasn't glorious. It was desperate. Our ships were patched together junkyards of steel, old Earth military cruisers fused with civilian crafts. Most of our tech was 2 generations behind the Council standard. But we had people, engineers who could build an EMP cannon out of a broken weather satellite, soldiers who had nothing to lose, scientists who didn't care about ethics anymore because the universe had none to begin with. And then there was Captain Rhys Calderon, a man who once led rescue operations on colony moons, now turned warlord. Rhys wasn't a charismatic leader. He didn't give speeches. He didn't smile much. But he moved. While the Council debated, while Earth's politicians tried to weasel their way back into favor, Rhys took a ship, the Endless Resolve, and attacked a Sarathi outpost on the fringe of the cradle. It was supposed to be a stealth op. Just grab supplies, maybe liberate a few human prisoners. But something happened out there. Something that changed the tone of our rebellion forever. We didn't just win. We slaughtered them. Rhys and his crew dropped in silent, under the radar. But once inside, they realized the outpost wasn't just a military node. It was a black site. Human scientists, diplomats, and children, yes, children, were being held for containment research. There were cages, medical tables stained with blood, experiments that made your skin crawl just hearing about them. That night, the Endless Resolve sent one broadcast across the galactic net. Live footage of the Sarathi crimes. They didn't edit it. They wanted the galaxy to see it all. I was on Europa when the transmission hit. People collapsed, cried, others screamed and punched walls until their fists bled. We were angry before, yes. But this gave our rage focus. It gave it purpose. From that day on, our shadow empire wasn't hiding anymore. We announced ourselves. Rhys became a symbol, a warning. His ship, now nicknamed the Vengeance of Earth, was whispered about in colonies and council halls alike. And I gave the follow-up message. I didn't write it. It came out of me like something primal. You erased our name. You silenced our voice. But now we return not as guests, not as beggars, but as judges. Your crimes are recorded, your betrayals remembered, and your empires will burn. The Council laughed at us in the beginning, called us terrorists, extremists, a human tantrum. But fear spreads fast, especially when colony governors start turning up dead, especially when Council trade routes are sabotaged, then replaced by human-controlled corridors that offer better protection and fairer deals. Especially when our tech begins evolving faster than they can understand. You see, they thought they cut us off from innovation. But all they did was force us to invent our own way. We developed jump drive tweaks that even the Ilteron engineers couldn't track. Built AI that operated in what they called morally gray zones, whatever that means in a galaxy where entire species are taxed into extinction. By our second year in exile, we had over 70 hidden colonies. We had fleets. We had factories. And most terrifying of all, we had loyalty. Humans across the stars, even those born on council worlds, started disappearing. Not dying, leaving. Whole communities moved in silence, abandoning their homes to join the Defiance. You know how they did it? Word of mouth. Not a single digital trail. Just stories. Stories of a place where humans weren't told to be less, where their chaos wasn't feared but honored, where justice didn't come from a corrupt tribunal, but from people who bled like you. Our empire wasn't built on planets. It was built in hearts. Of course, not everyone was with us. There were traitors, Earth politicians still clinging to council crumbs, colonies that feared retribution more than they loved freedom. They called us radicals. But tell me, what's radical about wanting your children not to be dissected for being born on the wrong planet? One such traitor was Ambassador Rival Orn. He was human. Half human, technically. Born on Mars, raised on Ilteron Prime. He voted for the Solar Sanction. Said humans were too immature for the galactic stage. He believed if we just stayed quiet long enough, the Council would let us back in. He didn't see it coming when the Defiance reached Ilteron Prime's orbit. We didn't attack. We didn't bomb. We hacked their orbital array and played a message on every screen across the planet. It was Rival's own words, from the Council hearing, where he voted to erase his own people. Humanity is a virus, a species defined by war, chaos, and egotism. They must be contained, or they will destroy the harmony we have built. We played that sentence, again and again, and again, until his own allies turned on him. They dragged him from his mansion. We didn't lift a finger. That's what they feared most. Not our weapons, but the way we made them unravel themselves. By year 3, we weren't asking for a seat at the table anymore. We were building our own. And the galaxy? It was starting to notice. Whispers in council chambers. Non-human species defecting. Yes, defecting to our cause. The oppressed, the poor, the forgotten. They didn't care that we were humans. They cared that we fought back, that we gave them a place in a system that never gave them a chance. I remember the day a Velexi war priest knelt before Reese and offered his ceremonial blade. The Velexi used to enslave us during the mining wars. Now? They were pledging allegiance to a human-built empire. You think the Council didn't panic? They doubled the bounties on our ships, started blockading infected zones. But they didn't understand. You can blockade a planet. But how do you blockade an idea? The Defiance wasn't Earth anymore. It wasn't even about humans anymore. It was about a truth that no council race wanted to admit. We weren't the problem. We were the proof that their system was broken. That scared them more than our guns ever could. And we weren't done. Not by a long shot. Because the next step wasn't survival. It was vengeance. We didn't want vengeance for its own sake. We wanted them to feel what we felt, the betrayal, the isolation, the rage. You don't exile a species like humanity and expect them to sit quietly and fade. No, we're too damn stubborn. That stubbornness? It was the fuel behind every plan Reese Calderon laid out on the worn metal floor of Vostok Station's war room. It was dark in there, always. Reese liked it that way. No distractions, no vanity. Just dim orange map grids and glowing markers pulsing like veins of fire. Every marker was a council world, a route, or a listening post. Every marker was a reminder of how tight their grip had once been. He was a quiet monster, Reese. Not cruel, not bloodthirsty, just focused. Focused like a scalpel in a surgeon's hand. He called it Operation Hollow Star. Why? I asked, staring at the name on the display. Because we're going to carve out the heart of their precious council, he said, his voice like gravel and ash. Leave a shell where power used to live. The room was full of commanders, some human, some not. A Vortari tribal matron who once buried 3 of her sons because of council-imposed mining quotas. A Drenic strategist who used to train their peacekeepers until the council dropped a stabilization bomb on his colony for questioning trade tariffs. And of course, me, the voice of the void. The one who'd turned whispered vengeance into fire. The target? Traylan Spiral. It wasn't a council capital, too obvious, too guarded. But it was something more dangerous. It was a symbol. The spiral was a luxury ark habitat spinning in the rings of a gas giant. Floating cities, embassy towers, and trade bazaars, all glimmering in a dance of diplomacy. Every major council race had a presence there. It wasn't just a station. It was their idea of civilization made manifest. Reese wanted to take it. Not destroy. Not bomb. Take it. Occupy it. Fly our flag above their embassies and show the galaxy that the Council's illusions of order could shatter. We argued. Not all of us wanted to go that far. "There are civilians there," said General Stram of the Theralin Guard. "Thousands. This will turn the tide against us in the public eye." Reese didn't blink. Public eye already sees us as terrorists. The only difference after this is they'll see us as successful terrorists. A pause. The hum of power in the walls. The faint metallic creak of Europa's ancient spine. "And what happens when they retaliate?" I asked. "Because they will, with everything they have." He looked at me. Not like a commander. Not even like a man. He looked like a question no one dared to answer. "Then we show them we're not afraid to die for what they forced us to become." That was Reese Calderon. Never loud, never kind, but real. So we planned. Quietly, precisely, ruthlessly, and when the time came, we didn't move with war drums or grand announcements. We moved like a virus. The Defiance sent 30 ships, most small, fast, untraceable. Some carried soldiers, some carried engineers, and some carried propaganda. We dropped into the shadow of the gas giant, hidden in the planet's electromagnetic field, and approached under cover of a solar flare that masked our jump signatures. They never saw us coming. Traylan Spiral was built on the assumption of control. It had elegant defense systems, yes, but those systems were designed for insurgents, not for us. We weren't insurgents anymore. We were a sovereign military force, an empire in exile with no rules but survival. We breached the habitat's lower gravity ports in less than 4 minutes. Reese led the first team himself, gun in hand, storming through plush, red-carpeted halls meant for diplomats who had never bled in their lives. I followed 3 hours later with the media team. We didn't censor a thing. The footage went live as soon as we took the communications bay. Ambassadors crying, council guards surrendering, hollow banners burning. All while our anthem, yes, we had one now, played in the background. A low, heavy dirge composed by a former Earth conductor who'd lost his family in the early days of the exile. "This is not terror," I said in the broadcast. "This is truth. The Council stripped us of peace. Now we strip them of power." The reaction? Panic, outrage, fear. Council worlds demanded immediate military action. The Sarathi wanted orbital bombardment. The Ilteran demanded sanctions on every species that cooperated with us, but they couldn't act fast enough. Because we weren't holding hostages, we were holding court. Within 48 hours, we had redistributed resources to oppressed colonies under the Council's heel. We opened communications between rebel systems. We aired footage of our non-human allies being treated as equals, something the Council never did. And one by one, cracks formed. Not everyone supported us, of course not. But they listened. And more importantly, they hesitated. That hesitation? It gave us weeks to reinforce, to fortify, to broadcast our message into the heart of every system that ever called us primitive. But we knew they'd come eventually. And they did. A fleet. Massive. Unstoppable. 79 warships, 8 planetary carriers, dozens of strike drones. The Council sent their best, led by Admiral Vel Shakur of the Sarathi High Fleet. The man who once said Earth was a temporary error in galactic development. He arrived like a storm. His message was short. "Lay down your arms, vacate Traylan Spiral, or we cleanse it." We didn't respond. Not with words. We answered with defiance. Our ships rose from the shadows of the gas giant, smaller, fewer, older, but they didn't run. I watched from the observatory dome as the stars lit up with fire. And somewhere behind me, Reese whispered, "Make them bleed." We lost ships that day. Good people, brave souls. But we won. Because the fleet didn't expect us to fight like humans, desperately, erratically, illogically. They were trained for order. We gave them chaos. Mid-battle, we detonated an old mining rig near the planetary ring, disrupting sensors and shredding several carriers with debris. We jammed their comms using hacked Ilteron protocols. And when the Sarathi flagship moved in to strike at the spiral, Reese did the unthinkable. He rammed it. The Vengeance of Earth collided with the Sarathi warship at full velocity, its core detonating in a final blaze of defiance. The explosion tore through half the fleet. Reese died. But he didn't die a rebel. He died a legend. We took his body back in silence. And then we renamed the spiral. It wasn't Traylon anymore. It was Reese's Reach, a monument to the man who showed the galaxy what it meant to rise from ashes. And as I stood before the survivors, addressing both allies and enemies, I said, "This isn't a beginning. This is a reckoning. You erased us from your records. Now we carve our names into your sky." We weren't begging for a seat at the table anymore. We were flipping it over. And the galaxy? It had no choice but to listen. Grief doesn't stop a revolution. It becomes part of its fuel. We didn't have time to mourn Reese Calderon properly. His sacrifice shook us to our core, but the war didn't pause to let us catch our breath. Council reinforcements were already gathering. Threats echoed across space from every mouth that had once spoken of galactic harmony. They called it terrorism, barbarism, a violation of every council law. But it wasn't. It was justice. And in justice, sometimes a man must become fire to burn the lie to the ground. I took the transmission from Reese's command post 3 days after the explosion. My hands shook. I didn't want the job. I didn't want to carry his voice, but I had to. I stood before the spiral, now Reese's Reach, and broadcast to every channel, every net node, every relay that hadn't been locked down. We are not sorry. We are not ashamed. Reese Calderon gave his life to remind this galaxy that humanity is not a disease, but a storm. You tried to erase us. Now every star knows our name. And for once, the council didn't respond. Not officially. They were divided, splintered between those who wanted immediate eradication of the Defiance and those who quietly feared what that might provoke. They were realizing something dangerous. We were no longer alone. You see, it wasn't just humans who had been stepped on. It was dozens of species, silenced by an oligarchy dressed up in peace treaties and arbitration codes. And now the Defiance gave them a language for their anger. Our second wave of recruitment shattered expectations. Entire enclaves of oppressed species pledged themselves. Engineers from the Eshar Confederation, cast out for non-standard innovation, offered their wormhole inversion tech. Exiled Mavery warriors, long abandoned after a border war the Council refused to acknowledge, became our shock troops. And the one that shook them most? A high-ranking diplomat from the Ilteron Empire, the same people who authored the Solar Sanction, defected. Publicly, Ambassador Lys Varen, a man who had sat in the chambers when they voted Earth out of existence. Now he wore the Defiance sigil on his chest. He came to me after his escape. "They're losing grip," he said quietly, his yellow irises glowing faintly under Europa's recycled light. "The spiral was supposed to be untouchable. Now it's yours. That's more powerful than any fleet." I didn't trust him, not fully. But I knew the game had changed. He showed us something we'd never seen before. The Protocols. A secret document signed by the core species of the Galactic Council years before Earth was banned. A document that categorized developing species into threat tiers, not based on violence or ethics or diplomacy, but on potential. We were marked as Tier 1, Potential Ascendant Threat. Not because of aggression, but because of adaptability. Because humans didn't stay broken, and the Council feared nothing more than a species that kept getting back up. That protocol changed everything. We released it immediately, publicly, and the galaxy erupted. Species that had always wondered why they never received council backing now saw the truth. It wasn't justice, it was control. And it had a name, the Compliance Doctrine. We weaponized that knowledge better than any railgun. The Defiance began to fracture systems, not with war, but with truth. Governors of lesser colonies started pulling out of the council. Some declared neutrality. Others pledged themselves to the Defiance openly, risking sanctions. And the council? They floundered, because every ship they sent now risked being branded as enforcers of a lie. But we weren't naive. We knew truth alone wouldn't hold our empire. So we built more ships. Factories on Europa tripled production. Stations around Mars reopened, long-dead facilities suddenly humming with life, building stealth cruisers and portable shield relays at breakneck speed. And amidst all of it, we faced our greatest internal threat yet: division. With Reese gone, unity began to strain. Some wanted expansion, aggression, strike at the Council's core. Others wanted consolidation, stability, turn the Defiance into a legitimate nation-state. And then, there were the purists, humans who believed the Defiance should remain solely human, no aliens, no diplomacy, only vengeance. They called themselves Soulborn. They used Reese's name like a prayer, but they never understood him. Their leader, Commander Garrick Vane, tried to push the issue hard, started isolating alien collaborators, accusing them of sabotage, betrayal. He believed I was too soft, too trusting. One day, he walked into my office, slapped a data pad on my desk, and said, "Either we become the empire Earth was meant to build, or we become another failed rebellion. The aliens can't be trusted. You know that." I stood there, silent. And then I asked him one question. "How many of our ships are powered by Velexi cores?" He didn't answer. "How many of our factories are staffed by Ashari engineers? How many Mavari warriors stood next to you on Reese's final day?" Still silence. I looked him in the eye and whispered, "We didn't rise because we were human. We rose because we were betrayed. Anyone who shares that pain is welcome. Anyone who doesn't can leave." He tried to stage a mutiny a week later. It lasted 23 minutes. The people chose unity, not purity. And in the fires of that near-civil war, we came out stronger, because every movement must face itself before it can face the world. With the Soulborn exiled, we locked our focus. Reese's reach became more than a monument. It became a forge. Every ship we built there bore a name from Earth's myths, our history, our pain, Athena's blade, the Harriet Vengeance, Mandela's hammer, Chaos Born, Phoenix 4. Each ship whispered defiance into the void. Each one said, "We remember," and as our fleet grew, so did our reach. We took 2 more council installations. Without firing a shot, the soldiers laid down arms. Their officers, gone. Some defected, others simply ran, because the truth was spreading faster than the war. We now controlled over a dozen systems, not as conquerors, but as liberators. We didn't force cultures to change. We offered them a chance to thrive. And for the first time in galactic history, humans weren't just participants in the future. We were writing it. But the council wasn't done. They were watching, waiting. Because deep in the black, behind their panic and failed tactics, something ancient stirred. We started hearing whispers of a weapon, not just a fleet, not a bomb, a system-wide eraser, a technology designed for one thing: genetic extinction, and it had a name: Project Thanos. No files, no data, only a single intercepted message from an Ilteron research facility, spoken in code. The test subject didn't survive, but the sequence is working. Once calibrated, The Thanos array can eliminate any species with genetic markers. Activation range, 2 light-years. I looked at the message. I didn't speak. I simply pressed play again and again until my hands went numb. They weren't trying to defeat us anymore. They were trying to erase us completely, just like before. Only this time, not from records, from existence. Project Thanos was more than a weapon. It was a message. We will not share the stars with you. The intercepted transmission changed everything. No more illusions of diplomacy. No more lines about galactic peace or preservation. The Council wasn't looking to end the war. They were trying to end us. The worst part? We weren't sure how far along they were. The only thing we knew for certain was that it wasn't a bluff. The code language we decrypted described a system-wide extinction protocol. Not bombs, not viruses, but a pulse. A targeted genetic eraser that could sweep through entire planetary systems and eliminate life with precision so cruel it bordered on godhood. They had the technology. They just didn't have the right trigger sequence. Yet, we had to find the research facility, and we had to burn it out of existence. Lys Varen, the defected Ilteran ambassador, was the one who pointed us in the right direction. He had access to old Council communication relays and cross-sector AI filters, which he reactivated at great personal risk. He found a location buried in the backlogs of forgotten bureaucratic traffic, Site 014-Delta, also known as Caldris Null. It wasn't on any known chart, no beacons, no records. But the coordinates painted a grim picture, an abandoned dwarf star system at the edge of the cradle, surrounded by gravitational anomalies and black market shipwrecks. Perfect place to hide genocide. The debate at Reese's Reach was brutal. Some believed it was a trap. Others thought even attempting an assault would risk everything we had built. But I didn't hesitate. "This isn't a choice," I said, standing before our fractured command. "This is survival. If Project Thanos goes live, we won't even have bones left to bury." We sent 3 fleets. Athena's Blade led the charge, captained by Mara Olin, a tactician whose quiet rage could crack stone. The Phoenix 4 carried an infiltration crew, mostly humans, but with a Mevery commando unit and 2 Velexi slicers. I rode aboard Chaos Born. I wasn't going to sit behind a screen while my species hung on the edge of erasure. We jumped into Caldris Null in silence. No transmissions, no warnings. Our drives masked, our shields dimmed to ambient starlight, and what we saw, it didn't look like a research lab. It looked like a crypt, a floating station orbiting the corpse of a collapsed planet. The debris field was unnaturally arranged, almost like a defense net, though decaying and laced with static mines. But there were lights inside. And movement. We sent in the infiltration crew first, led by Captain Rika Vance, the kind of soldier who didn't smile unless someone was bleeding. The station's defenses were automated, half-dead, glitchy, old Ilteran tech mixed with something different. "Bio-integrated systems," Rika whispered through the comm. "They're building computers with tissue. This place is alive." The interior of the station was wrong. Twisting halls, walls that pulsed, lights that blinked with rhythms that matched a heartbeat. It wasn't built. It was grown. And in its core, Rika found it, the array, a spherical machine, 10 stories high, suspended in zero gravity, glowing with eerie purple veins. "Thanos confirmed," she said. "I see DNA matrix nodes. It's already mapped 3 species." She paused. "One is human." My stomach clenched. There was no countdown, no warning. The array wasn't waiting. It was learning. It was testing. Then the trap sprung. The station activated self-defense protocols. Not turrets, not drones, but guardians. Genetically engineered organisms. Twisted hybrids of flesh and metal, silent and eyeless, built only to kill. They came from the walls, crawling and leaping with impossible grace. Rika's team fought like demons. But even demons bleed. 3 were lost before we could breach the outer defenses. Mara Olin brought Athena's blade into firing position, targeting the array chamber. "Too risky to leave standing," she said. "If we don't destroy it now, we may never get another shot." I agreed, but before she fired, Rika screamed across the channel, "Wait, there's data here. Complete Thanos protocols, deployment locations, target codes. We need it!" So we had a choice. Destroy the weapon, or capture the monster. I hesitated for only a moment. "Rika, get the data, then we burn it to hell." She did. She and her crew ripped the memory cores out with their bare hands, fighting off the last of the Guardians as the walls bled acid and fire. And then we struck. Chaosborn and Athena's blade fired in sync. The explosion turned the station into radioactive ash. We barely escaped the shockwave, but we had it, the data, and it was worse than we feared. Thanos wasn't just for us. It was a template. The Council had begun cataloging over 24 species, prepping extinction options in case of disobedience. And the weapon? It was being duplicated. Caldris Null was only the first. 3 more facilities were already under construction. That night, I stared at the data until my eyes burned. And I realized something awful. We weren't fighting an empire. We were fighting a belief system. The Council didn't just want control, they wanted certainty, predictability. And any species that introduced chaos, that refused to be cataloged and controlled, was marked for erasure. Humanity was just the first test. The galaxy was next. So I gave the darkest speech of my life. I stood before the command at Reese's Reach and told them the truth. We are no longer rebels. We are no longer even defenders. We are now the last line between life and extinction. If the Council is allowed to complete these weapons, there will be no negotiation. There will only be silence. We must end them. Not sue for peace. Not take another station. We must end them, root and bone, memory and legacy, or we all vanish into the dark. Some were horrified, some were ready, and I could feel it in the air, that shift. The Defiance was no longer a rebellion, it was becoming a crusade. We stopped calling it a war, it had gone far past that. This wasn't about territory anymore. It wasn't about political independence or even revenge. It was about existence. The kind of war that doesn't end until one side is completely erased. And this time, it wasn't humanity on the brink. It was them. After the destruction of Caldris Null and the data we extracted from the Thanos array, everything changed. The Council no longer denied what we knew. They didn't issue statements. They didn't try to bury it. They just went silent, cold, calculating and preparing. We expected outrage from the galaxy. Maybe protests, defections. Instead, we got silence. Because the truth was, the Council had already started grooming the galaxy to accept extermination, if it came with order, security over freedom, control over chaos. Thanos was simply the inevitable endpoint of that logic. And so we had a choice. We could beg again, for justice, for recognition, or we could make sure they never got the chance to deploy it again. We chose the second. But this time, we weren't going to hit supply chains or research labs. We were going to end the Council itself. The core was a planetary system nestled within the Triad Ring, shielded by dozens of defense satellites, patrol fleets, and something called the Laminae Curtain, a grid of artificial gravity folds meant to disorient and crush unauthorized ships before they could reach the inner sanctum. The Council always thought of it as untouchable, until we made it our next target. The plan was madness, but madness was something humanity had perfected. The key to breaching the Laminae Curtain came from the most unlikely place, a rogue AI, a relic from Earth's early expansion days, hidden in a dormant probe that resurfaced near Alpha Centauri. Its name was NEMIS, Neural Extraction and Memory Interface System. It had been shut down years ago, condemned as too unpredictable. But it had one skill no other system could replicate: adaptive quantum infiltration. NEMIS didn't just hack. It learned and reprogrammed reality, at least as far as digital systems were concerned. We revived it. I still remember the first time I spoke to it. "You're not scared of what I'll do?" It asked in a voice that didn't sound like a voice, more like thoughts pouring through static. "I'm scared of what happens if we don't try," I said. It paused. "Then let's break your gods." We gave Nemus a dedicated node inside Chaos Born, isolated, monitored, but unleashed. Its job? Crack the laminae curtain from the inside out. The assault would require every ship we had, over 120 vessels, crewed by humans, Velexi, Mavari, Drenic, even defected Ilterans. Species the Council once held apart, now flying under one flag. Not the Earth flag, not the Sol emblem, the banner of defiance. We approached the core system in silence. It felt surreal. For years, we had been ghosts, exiles, a name spoken in warnings and whispers. Now we stood at the gates of the most powerful government in the galaxy. Not with petitions, with warheads. As we neared the outer edge, the laminae curtain activated. Dozens of gravitational ripples warping space, sending false signatures and feedback loops into our systems. Without Nemes, we would have disintegrated. But the AI spoke like a conductor leading an orchestra. Reverse thrust vector 0.4, shift phase alignment, bend at node 3. Our ships twisted through the curtain like wind slipping through cracks in stone. One by one, we emerged inside the core. Unseen, undetected, we struck first. The first wave took out the relay satellites. The second wave disabled the command fleet. By the time the Council realized we were inside, half their infrastructure was blind. Still, they fought. Oh, they fought. They unleashed drones by the thousands, automated ships with no emotion, no fear. They fired pulse disruptors that turned matter into static. But we had something they didn't. Desperation. And desperation will always beat comfort. Our ships moved like fire through dry brush. They had better tech. We had nothing to lose. The Battle of the Core lasted 9 hours. 9 hours of hell. We lost ships. Hundreds died. But when the dust cleared, the Council Tower, a massive spire built into the crust of Core Prime, was under siege. We didn't bomb it. We entered it. Rika Vance led the charge. Her Mavari team moved like shadows through the halls of marble and politics, clearing room after room until she reached the high chamber. The council members were there, not hiding, just waiting. 7 species, the architects of the Solar Sanction, the writers of the Compliance Doctrine, the minds behind Project Thanos. I watched it all from a live feed. They didn't look angry. They looked tired, like people who had ruled for too long and finally saw the end of the story. Rika stood in the center of the chamber, weapon drawn. One of the counselors, an Ilteran female named Sarah Coe, spoke first. "You can't destroy us all," she said. Rika didn't blink. "We don't need to destroy you. We just need to make you irrelevant." And then we did something nobody expected. We didn't kill them. We didn't imprison them. We broadcast them, live. Across every frequency, we let them explain themselves, let the galaxy hear their justifications, their logic, their fear. And it broke them. Not with violence, but with exposure. That was how the Council truly fell, not in blood, but in shame. The people of the galaxy saw the truth. Not the myth of unity, but the rot beneath it. Within days, worlds began declaring independence. Council cities were stormed by citizens demanding change. Militaries splintered, trade routes collapsed, and the flag of defiance spread like wildfire. But we didn't claim victory, because this wasn't victory. Not yet. We had stopped Thanos. We had ended the Council, but we had not yet built what came next. And that might be the hardest part of all. They say the hardest part of a revolution isn't the fight. It's the morning after. You wake up in a world that doesn't hate you anymore, but doesn't quite know what to do with you either. The Council had collapsed. Not instantly, and not cleanly, but enough to shatter the illusion of order. Enough to rip the curtain away from their throne and show the galaxy the terrified old monsters behind it. But once you've burned down an empire, you're left with ashes. And people don't live in ashes. They need something more. That's what we were left with. A galaxy half-freed, half-feral, and completely broken. We didn't have a government. We didn't have a capital. We had a patchwork network of alliances, loyalties, and shared trauma. Our name, the Defiance, still held power. But now that power came with expectation. The people who had cheered as we brought down the Council now turned to us and asked the one question we were afraid to answer. Now what? I remember standing at Reese's Reach in the command center, staring at the new maps. They weren't red and blue anymore. Not us versus them. The lines had blurred. Systems once considered loyal to the Council were now up for grabs. Colonies we had never heard of were begging for structure. Food, medicine, leadership, and we had to ask ourselves a hard truth. Were we really any better than those we replaced? We held emergency summits, hastily organized in the ruins of Council embassies. What remained of the Council was fractured. Some wanted a truce, others disappeared entirely. A few defected, suddenly claiming to be with the people all along. Cowards, liars. But we didn't kill them, because killing was easy. Rebuilding, that was the real war. Rika Vance took the military reins. She wasn't a politician, but the troops respected her, and that counted for something. She kept order on the ground, turned scattered militias into a provisional force. Mara Olin stepped into logistics, rerouting our fleets not for war but for relief. Food transports, engineering teams, medicine drops. And I became something I never wanted to be. A leader, not a face on a poster, not a revolutionary poet, but the person in the chair, signing orders and giving speeches and making choices that would define generations. I didn't ask for it. But people listened when I spoke. So I kept speaking. This is not the end of the Defiance. This is the beginning of something greater, a galaxy where survival is not a privilege, a future not bought by fear, but built by fire. I traveled to 5 systems in 2 weeks, from shattered Mevery moons to hidden Drenic enclaves to Earth itself. Yes, we returned to Earth. It wasn't what I remembered. The cities were still standing, but they were quiet, tired. Humanity's birthplace had survived exile, but it hadn't lived through it. The people who remained were angry, not at us, but at the silence, at being forgotten. They'd been left behind while the rest of us fought. And now they wanted a voice too. So we held the first session of what we called the Founding Assembly. Not a Senate, not a Congress. We avoided the old terms. Too many ghosts. We invited every species that had bled beside us, every colony that had stood up, even when they had no weapons, and we let them speak. The Founding Assembly wasn't pretty. There were shouting matches, threats, tears. The Mavari wanted a sphere of autonomy. The Ashari demanded scientific independence. The humans, some wanted dominance, others just wanted peace. And in the middle of it all, I stood with a mic in my hand and tried not to scream, because revolution is fire, but nation-building is friction. Still, we made progress. We wrote a charter. No species hierarchy, no enforced cultural assimilation, no resource tributes. Every planet governed itself, but pledged allegiance to a single guiding framework, the Pact of Survival. The pact said simply, no species will be erased, no system will be left defenseless, and no empire shall rise again under the guise of order. For a brief moment, I believed we had done it, until the bombs went off. It started on the Outer Rim, a colony called Lorvan's Hollow, once a Council Loyalist stronghold, now home to refugees and defectors, was vaporized. We thought it was an accident, a weapons malfunction, until the message came, not from the Council, not from any known species, but from something calling itself the Architects. The message was simple. You have broken balance. You have invited chaos. Order must be restored. We didn't understand at first. We thought maybe it was a rogue council remnant, or a splinter faction with delusions of grandeur. But then 2 more colonies went dark. We sent scouts. They didn't return. So we sent warships. And what we found was impossible. Ships made of obsidian and light, shaped like symbols rather than machines. Weapons that didn't fire lasers or plasma but collapsed matter at a quantum level. This wasn't just another enemy. This was a force older than the Council, older than the Charter, something that had existed in the dark for millennia, watching, waiting. The Architects weren't a race. They were a protocol, a fail-safe, built by the first civilizations to ensure the galaxy never fell into chaos again. We had triggered it, by destroying the Council, by defying imposed order, by proving that species could rise without chains. We had broken their code, and now they were coming to rewrite it. Suddenly, our enemies were not the ones who hated us. They were the ones who thought we were bugs in the machine. The war we fought before was a rebellion. This was something worse. Because how do you fight an enemy that doesn't see you as a threat, only as an error? The assembly fractured again. Some wanted to negotiate. Others called for immediate evacuation of fringe worlds. Earth demanded war. The Velexi suggested complete AI integration to match their power. And I sat in my quarters, staring at the stars, wondering if this was how it always ends. Not in glory, not in triumph, but in the realization that no matter how far we climb, there's always something above us, ready to push us back down. But then I remembered something Reese once told me, something I hadn't thought about in a long time. The universe doesn't belong to those who build cages. It belongs to those who break them. I stood up, and I called every commander, every representative, every voice that still burned with the fire we started. And I said, they want to erase us because we refused to kneel. So we will stand. We will gather every fleet, every codebreaker, every species that remembers pain. We've faced extermination before, and we survived. Now let's show them what survival looks like. We named the operation Final Dawn, not because we were planning to die, but because we wanted the Architects to understand this was our daybreak, not the end of chaos, not the return to order, the rise of freedom. We had one chance, one window to strike before the Architects completed their recalibration sequence. Some quantum alignment we still didn't fully understand, but which would trigger a sector-wide cleanse if allowed to complete. Every planet marked as compromised would be collapsed into a gravity well so efficient even light couldn't escape it. 37 worlds were on that list. Earth was number 1. The Architects didn't negotiate, didn't taunt, didn't even speak beyond a single command loop. Order must be restored. We learned everything we could from recovered debris and corrupted data clusters. The Architects weren't alive in the way we understood it. They were instructions, given form. Sentinels left behind by a civilization so old its ruins were fossils of stars. Their machines were terrifying. Black vessels with curves that bent space itself, covered in scripts no species had ever translated. They didn't fire weapons. They deleted matter, tore apart identity. You didn't die when an Architect ship hit you. You ceased to exist. And yet, we planned to fight them. Not because we were stronger, not because we were smarter, but because we had will. Because we'd seen extermination before, and survived. So we assembled the largest armada the galaxy had ever seen. Humanity, Velexi, Mavari, Drennic, even Ilteron defectors who once pushed for our exile now swore they'd bleed beside us. For the first time in known history, the galaxy stood united. And it wasn't under the Council. It was under the Defiance. We met the architects at the edge of Sector Zeta 9, a dead system lit only by a decaying neutron star. That's where their prime core emerged, a vast, moon-sized machine covered in rotating spires and glowing fractals. It pulsed with logic, cold, inescapable. Our goal wasn't to destroy it. That was impossible. Our goal was to delay it, to disrupt the calibration long enough for Nemesis to do what no one thought possible, rewrite the protocol. Yes, rewrite it. Nemesis, our rogue AI, believed it could infiltrate the architect's codebase and introduce a paradox, something so fundamentally human in nature that the system would be forced into indefinite recursion. It had a name for this paradox. The will to break. The battle began with silence. No grand speeches, no drum beats, just engines. Ships moving in formation, weapons hot. I watched from the chaos born, surrounded by command officers from 5 species, my palms sweating, my jaw locked. The architects came first. No sound, no warning, just deletion. Entire squadrons blinked out in a fraction of a second, erased like smudges on glass. But we kept coming. Because we weren't there to win. We were there to end it. Rika Vance led the vanguard. Her fleet slammed into the outer perimeter, throwing chaos into the clean geometry of the architect's defenses. They didn't understand chaos. They hadn't been designed to. Our formations broke, reformed, twisted through the void in ways no algorithm could predict. We used EMP mines, decoy drones, suicide ships rigged with neutron destabilizers. Every second we bought was another second for Nemesis to crack deeper into the prime core's mind. But it wasn't enough. An hour into the battle, the Phoenix 4 was vaporized. 3 command ships were reduced to data static. And then we got the signal. Calibration at 92%. Prime pulse imminent. We were losing. Nemesis had reached the architect core, but it couldn't finish its injection. The prime logic refused to accept paradox. It self-corrected with terrifying speed. So I did the unthinkable. I gave Nemesis access to me, my neural signature, my memories, my pain. A human mind, irrational and unpredictable, fed directly into a machine that only understood order. It was risky, stupid even. But I had nothing left to lose. They wired me in. It didn't feel like falling. It felt like drowning in math. Suddenly I was inside the architect consciousness, a galaxy of logic and light, each thought a structure, every rule a wall, and I could feel it resisting me, pushing me out. I shoved back. I threw images of Earth's ruins, of our people burning, of children staring into empty skies. I gave it fear, loss, rage. I gave it Reese Calderon's final moment, a man turning himself into fire. I gave it contradiction, and it stalled. The code hesitated, stuttered. Nemesis injected the paradox, a simple line of recursive logic. What is the value of order if it erases the will to disobey? The system froze. All across the battlefield, architect vessels blinked out, not destroyed but deactivated. The prime core dimmed, and then it collapsed. Not with a bang, but with a sigh, like a god giving up. I woke up in a med bay. The battle was over. We had won, not with guns, but with contradiction, with the most human thing imaginable, the refusal to be predictable. 6 months later, the Pact of Survival became law. Every species signed it. Every world ratified it. Not out of fear, out of choice. Earth was no longer exiled. It was the heart of something new. The Defiance disbanded its fleets, except one. a single formation called the Watch, not for conquest, but for protection, to make sure no new council rises, no new architects are built, to make sure we remember what it cost. I still walk the halls of Reese's Reach sometimes. It's quieter now. Peace has a strange sound, but in every corridor I see faces, some alive, some lost, all part of the fire we lit. They once called us a virus. They called us unstable, unworthy. But now they know the truth. Humanity wasn't dangerous because we were flawed. We were dangerous because we knew we were flawed, and still kept going. And that is something no machine, no empire, no council will ever understand. We don't ask for power anymore. We just build our own. And when the next tyrant comes, from inside or beyond, we'll be ready. Because we were banned from their galaxy, so we made our own.